Yemen's Houthi rebels are praising the death of the country's ousted leader. Sources say Ali Abdullah Saleh was traveling in an armored vehicle in the capital city Sana'a when his convoy came under attack by Houthi militants. Shortly after, a video circulated on social media showing a man who resembled Saleh with a severe head wound. Members of Saleh's party say he died in the attack. His death comes just 2 days after the ex-president said he would be parting ways with Houthi allies. Instead, he wanted to turn a new page with the Saudi-led coalition. Joining me now from Cheltenham in the UK is Iona Craig, a freelance journalist who has covered Yemen and the Arabian Peninsula extensively. Iona, thanks so much for being with us. Let's step back a little bit, if you would. The strained relationship between the Houthi rebels and Yemen's central government dates back to the 90s. Walk us through the origins of this conflict.
Well, the Yemeni government then, of course, was controlled by Ali Abdullah Saleh, who died today, and he fought 6 wars with the Houthis between 2004 and 2010, and in fact killed their founding father at the beginning of those wars. But then in a very typical Saleh move, if you like, he then realigned himself with the Houthis in 2014 after he'd been ousted and handed over power to President Hadi, the current president, who's currently in exile in Riyadh. And he helped the Houthis then take control of the capital, Sana'a, which then in the end, 6 months later, led to the Saudi coalition's military intervention in Yemen. So this was, a relationship between the state and the Houthis that had always been antagonistic. But Saleh was really the key to all of this. They went from being enemies to being allies to then, in the end, being enemies again today.
And then Saleh was killed with a bullet to the head just hours after gaining Saudi support. Now, the Saudis are not very popular in Yemen, is that correct?
Well, certainly in northern Yemen, they're not, in the territory controlled by the Houthis. But if you travel around southern Yemen, where I've been as well over the last 2.5 years during the course of the war, and in fact, even in October, there they welcome the Saudis' intervention. These are old opponents of Saleh in the south. They really hated the Houthis for what they'd done with Ali Abdullah Saleh. And so they welcomed the intervention of the Saudi coalition, but certainly in the north. And those who support the Houthis, they're very much against the Saudi coalition. And this is where it really started in Yemen as a civil war at the beginning.
So it seems very much like a country divided. Do we know who has clear control of the country at this point?
Nobody has clear control. The Houthis now have a clearer control of Sana'a than perhaps they did a few days ago. In the south, really, it's been divided up. The United Arab Emirates, who are a member of the Saudi coalition, hold a lot of control in the south, along with President Hadi, although those troops have sometimes fought each other as well. But now, really, this is more of a straight fight between the Houthis and the Saudi coalition. Now Saleh has been removed from the picture, and the Houthis are going to actively hunt down the loyalists of Ali Abdullah Saleh and anybody who was involved in fighting against the Houthis in the last few days in the capital. And that's going to make conditions very difficult for people in the city now.
Absolutely. Now, reports are that the former Yemeni leader was trying to flee to Saudi Arabia when he was killed. What were the implications behind the deal he struck with the Saudi-led coalition?
A deal between Saleh and the Saudi coalition was always inevitable. This relationship with the Houthis, this alliance he'd made with them, was never going to be long-term. And in order for him to survive politically beyond this war, he was going to need to do a deal with the Saudis. And so that part of that deal was him flipping on the Houthis, if you like. He was turning on them. But it appears to have been a miscalculation, certainly timing-wise on his part, and equally so by the Saudi coalition, and has, by the last 24 hours events, seen that it's massively backfired, and now the Houthis have very much the upper hand in Sana'a.
Right now, as you said, this was a move that was supposed to ease tensions with Saudi Arabia. The Houthis are an Iranian-allied Shia group. The Yemeni government, though, is also Shia. Is there any chance of reconciliation here?
I think it's not really about the Shia Sunni part of it in that context. Yes, that's often heaped on Yemen's conflict in the sense that the Houthis are seen to being allied with Iran, and it plays into the Saudi versus Iranian proxy conflict. But really, on the ground in Yemen, it's not about religious divisions. And even I've met Houthis who are Sunni, so it doesn't really ideally play into that in Yemen internally. But I think now the opportunities of doing a deal have been closed. I think think now, certainly in the immediate future, that is very unlikely to happen. There's going to be strong retaliation from the Houthis. They see themselves as being victorious now over the last 2 days in what's happened, and they're calling people out on the street to celebrate tomorrow.
Right.
In the meantime, the Saudis have already responded with airstrikes tonight and are attacking the Houthis literally as we speak on the ground in Sana'a right now.
So since this is not a religious conflict, what is the core of the conflict here?
Well, it began as a fight between two presidents, one of whom died today. So a fight between Saleh, who was trying to claw back power, really, and Hadi, the current president who is living in Riyadh and has been there for the last 2.5 years. It then, of course, then turned into what has become more of a proxy conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And Iran, although the Houthis were allied to them at the beginning of this war, the potential now for Iran to become more involved have increased, and probably increased more so in the last 24 hours because of what has happened. And really, the Houthis are an opportunity for Iran to use them as a tool to beat Saudi with if they need and want to. And of course, that really plays into American politics as well, because if the White House and the Trump administration continues to warm towards Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman and more hawkish towards Iran, then Yemen becomes a tool for Iran to use in order to challenge Saudi Arabia. And that's a real danger in this conflict right now, that any statements made by the Trump administration that are harsher against Iran really could actually prolong the conflict in Yemen right now, which is having such a devastating impact on civilians.
And it certainly seems that things are poised to get more violent before they get less so. Is that correct?
Yes, certainly. I think now, even seeing more immediately in the hours after Saleh's death, the response from the Houthis and the response from the coalition have both been violent already. So yes, this war is going to get even messier. This is certainly not an end to the conflict. It's just going to be a shift and a change and a new phase in the conflict. It's certainly not going to bring it close to an end anytime soon.
Iona Craig, thank you very much for your insight.